a little bit and ask you a few questions if you don't
Yeah,
mind.
absolutely.
And always, you can say, I don't feel like answering that or I'm not comfortable or whatever. Uh, and we don't do a ton of prep for this show, so I'm going to come at you a little bit blind, but I don't think you're going to care. I think you're going to like it. We often talk about Lansing. Well, you know that Lansing is a refugee resettlement community. So we've just had people from the Ukraine, we've had Afghanistan, we've had going back to the Vietnam War, we have Laos and the Hmong community and all of that. So for years, we've been accepting of refugees. We often talk because we're so partnered and so close with the Avenue, for example. We have a large queer community, queer and trans community at the Fledge, and we talk about Lansing being that refugee resettlement for the LGBTQ, I say them all, IA plus community. Did you feel that sense when you were 18? Do you ever think about that? I mean, I don't usually think about Kalamazoo. I think about Danville or Grand Ledge or something, and it's really hard to grow up gay there or queer there. And what are your thoughts on that? I'm curious.
Yeah. Well, I loved Kalamazoo. But when I was in Kalamazoo, I was focused on racial justice. I was never in the closet, but I remember somebody signed my yearbook, and they were somebody who considered themselves a friend, and they signed my yearbook. Hey, Emily, this weekend I'm going gay bash. I'm going to spend it gay bashing. Ha 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 ha. Now, I don't think they even remember writing that. Now they consider themselves to be a very strong ally of mine. It was not a welcoming place for LGBT folks. Lansing has at least been a stronger, more welcoming place for LGBT folks. We actually have a very rich history in terms of the nationwide LGBT community. The East Side neighborhood is the very first lesbian neighborhood in the whole country. The first neighborhood considered to be a lesbian neighborhood. And the Lansing Association for Human Rights is one of the very first LGBT organizations in the whole state, older than the statewide organization, even before they merged with another organization to become the Equality Michigan as it is. And that's the statewide organization that I used to be executive director of. We have a rich history, but that doesn't mean that it feels safe to be an LGBT person, just as it isn't for anybody. We still don't have this. We just still don't have equal rights. We still don't have equities. We still don't have safety. But it is easier to find other LGBT folks. And part of the reason that it wasn't safe in the community I came from is because it was much more conservative in terms of I was raised in a Christian conservative household, and the community leaned much more Christian conservative. And here there was more diversity of thought. There was more openness to and acceptance of different ideas and acceptance for who you are, and it was just easier to find your people. So I've always appreciated that, and because of that, it was easier to just build your own community. So I actually am part of my history is that I started the first organization at Michigan State that allowed for LGBT residential caucuses in dorms. And now every dorm at Michigan State has an LGBT caucus. And I think the students there don't know the difference. They don't know what it's like to not have a place in the dorm where they can meet as LGBT folks. But when I first went to Michigan State, I actually wrote them a letter and I said, I didn't focus on LGBT stuff. I think maybe I didn't even know that was something that I could ask for myself. I wrote them a letter and I said, I'm coming from a very racially diverse place where my friends are mostly people of color. Um, is there a racial justice organization that I can be a part of? Because I knew that I was going to a school that was going to be majority white, and I didn't know that I was going to be comfortable. And I wanted to go to a place where I could continue to work on these issues, and work to change the world to make it a more racially just place. And while I was at Michigan State, I saw the issues related to acceptance of me as an LGBT person. And it was almost like I was like, oh, I'm not safe here either. I'm going to add that to my list, because I put a rainbow sign on my dorm door and it kept getting taken down. So it actually wasn't my original focus. And yet people consider me to be an LGBT advocate, but that's not what I started out focusing on. I just gradually learned that I wasn't safe as myself.
Well, thank you for your answer. Exceeded my expectation. You taught us history. You gave us another way of looking at it. You know, the Supreme Court, the SCOTUS is scaring the shit out of all of us.
Yes.
So I love the answer. And we kind of, just real quick, you've said the bookstore. Tell us a little bit. You're going to open up again after August 2nd, so we'll keep that in mind. But what's it called? Where's it at?
It's called The Resistance. It's at 515 West Ionia. And a lot of people know the location because it used to be the location of Beeland's Flower Shop. Lucille Beeland was a legend in the community. She was a elected official. She was a feminist. And when I was appointed to the Ingham County Women's Commission, she was still alive, and I was actually able to give her a tribute. She has now passed away. So I am working on getting one of her famous hats, because she used to go to brunch with Elfrida Schmidt, and the rumor is that people like to treat them like they were rivals, but they went to brunch and played cards weekly, and Elfrida still has some of her hats, and so I'm going to get a hat to put in the bookstore. And so I came in and I built out this beautiful historic building, and I actually sold my house, and as a civil rights person, I've never had money in my life, and I decided I don't want to. I've always felt like I don't ever want to have money. I don't want to know what that's like. I don't feel like it does good things for people. And so I sold my house, and I decided I'm not going to hold on to it. I'm just going to not let myself know what it feels like. I'm just going to pass it on to something else and use it to invest in a space for the community. And I used it to build out the space. And then I also pursued a lawsuit against somebody who hit me with a motorcycle during the Black Lives Matter mural painting. And that helped to pay off the rest of the bills. So that is how this beautiful space came to be. And I feel like it is a nice tribute to Elfrida's feminism, but also this is a space for all communities impacted by oppression. We made it a nonprofit so the community owns it. I don't. And we're making it so that the community advises on what needs to be here. And we don't, since the community knows best what knowledge and information should be in this place, and can use this space for free to do book clubs. And our motto is from books to boots, because we really feel like there are a lot of book clubs happening, but really we should be using the knowledge we absorb to make a difference in the community. How do we use what we're learning to actually move us forward?
After I read Parable of the Talents, Octavia E. Butler, right?
Mm-hmm, yeah, Octavia Butler.
I doubled down on all my permaculture and started learning gun safety.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that was my boots on the ground from what she taught me.
Yeah, she's amazing.
So, yes, some of my favorite. Do you sell the book Abundance, since you were talking about getting rid of scarcity?
Yeah, I don't have abundance right now, but we do have so many books right now on mutual aid. We have a lot of books on sustainability. We have a lot of books on just how community building can happen in a way where we can all support each other, and our efforts can complement each other, because we really feel like we have learned so much from COVID about about the strength that we all inherently already have, and I think that already we had some really dedicated community members to the idea of mutual aid, and it is a value uh, um, that that a lot of our communities have already touted and been trying to educate us on, and we saw why it's necessary. So I'm greatly in support of that. We also try to keep our section on the justice system and alternatives to policing and alternatives to carceral systems well stocked. And for folks that feel like there isn't a great demand for that, we have a really hard time keeping that stuff stocked.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's good. That's good. So let's get to the part I know you're dying to talk about.
Yeah.
So tell us about the election that's coming up and what you're doing there and all that stuff.
Yeah. So, I mean, we are not very far away. We're only a couple of weeks away. And
August 2nd.
yeah, August 2nd. And uh, one thing as an advocate and somebody who works with community on community issues, and especially with our most vulnerable communities, and as somebody who is part of a community impacted by oppression, it does not surprise me that everybody is so exhausted. I talk to a lot of folks, and it may seem like people are sleeping on this election. We can't. We cannot, because August 2nd in the race for the House district, the new 77th House district, is likely going to decide who will be our next state representative for North Lansing, because that House district leans more than 60% Democrat. And the Republican in the race is really hardly running, but also barely has a chance. So who we vote for matters. Who we vote for always matters. And at this point, we only have one candidate that is from Lansing. We only have one candidate that is even from the district. The other two candidates, we have one that moved into the district in March, and we have one candidate who has been here for around 5 years and moved from Lapeer to DeWitt. And we need somebody, and this is why I opted to run. And I did get into the race late because I learned who was running in March. And then took time to do due diligence to find out if there were other folks interested and that felt they might be a better fit. But we need somebody that has been working on the ground in community with our community leaders, that has some understanding of what the community's needs are, priorities are, and are willing to work with the community and ensure that all of our community members are always determining the solutions for the issues that impact them. And as it is, we don't even have in the other two candidates folks who have ever been involved in this district, much less that are in relationship with folks in the community. And that's not only unacceptable, but I felt very insulted in finding out that these are the folks that offered themselves up as candidates to run for office to represent us. I, as a voter, was concerned. So I had very mixed feelings, because I certainly do not believe in this idea of I, as an individual, can save anything. I looked at it as I know that I am committed to making sure that the community is always involved in all of our solutions, is always there to come up with the solutions to the issues that impact them. And if I can offer myself as somebody from Lansing to ensure that that happens, when the other two have never been a part of the things that happen here, have not been my neighbor, have not been a member of our community, have not been active in any of the things that happen, don't show up at our events, don't show up at our community building projects, then that's what I will do. So you will notice that at a certain point, I stopped even pursuing many of the endorsements from the special interests, because the endorsements that I care about are the ones from other community builders, from the community changers, from the people who actually are committed to the folks that are impacted as well. So I do want the community to think about the fact that we will be impacted by whoever is elected. And I know that we're tired. I know that we're exhausted by everything that's happened, but we also don't want somebody speaking for us that doesn't know us.
I got a couple of logistic questions.
Yeah.
When's the last time someone could register to vote and still vote on August 2nd?
So we have passed the time, which is 2 weeks out from the primary, 2 weeks out from each election is the last date to register for that election. That is, register in order to vote, register from a distance or online. You can still register in person at the office, at each office. So you can still register up to the election if you go to the office. Okay. And you can register for the general. So we can still be registering people. We need to actually bring folks to the office to register folks. And people who are registered can still absolutely vote. And if you have requested an AV ballot, you absolutely should return that absentee ballot and vote. And if you are able to vote, we and plenty of other community organizations will help you get to the polls. Right now, we should be thinking about just actively taking this election seriously. A lot of people don't think about how important a primary is. The voting numbers are way lower than a general, and voting in the primary. We still need to vote in the general, because that over 60% number that I mentioned about how, oh, this primary is done and completely Democratic in the primary, that only matters if we show up in the general. Right. If all Democrats stay home in the general, then that Republican, who is basically a troll, could win this election. But we will be choosing our Democratic contender in this primary and basically winning the election as long as we actually come out to vote in the primary and then make sure to vote in the general.
Thank you for that. So people can still go get registered, still vote. And One Love Global came by yesterday and gave us a bunch of stuff for registering to vote. So thank you for that, everyone, by the way. Okay, so now I'm going to go on to something else. A lot of people don't know what a House of Representative person does. I think they might know that they help, approve laws and write legislation like that, but maybe not even that. I think we know our mayor and how he can impact us horribly from what they do, but I don't know how a House of Representative helps me or impacts me. What would your quick answer to that be, if there is one?
So your state legislator controls a lot of things. The state budget controls things like the budget for human services, which is the food benefits, housing benefits, unemployment, and also municipal funding. So I'll tell you, I've had conversations with one of my opponents, John Horford, who touted his endorsements from the mayors from the different districts. And I will be perfectly honest with you and say, You know what? I'm unconcerned with that. I'm unconcerned with the endorsements that you have from the mayors from these different districts. I don't want them. It's not that I can't work with them later, but I will work with them and ensure that they are taking seriously the values of the community. And I'm working to make sure I win this position as state representative, because as state representative, they need to work with me. They need to work with their state representative, because the state representative helps to ensure municipal funding and a lot of the policies and programming that the city has to deal with. And that's not to say that the state representative bullies a city. That's to say that the mayor still has to work with their state representative. And the state representative and the candidate for state representative doesn't have to kiss the ass of the mayor in order to win that spot. The mayor has to understand, and any mayor has to work with the candidate, that they also need to cooperate and negotiate and understand the policies and values that people want from the state representative. We as state legislators, in valuing and prioritizing the people, don't need to pander to city officials, because state legislators make overarching policies. State policy affects civil rights. State policy affects human services. State policies affect all of the overarching policies that all of our state departments do. So we can always, that includes when we are talking about police and setting standards, when we are talking about what kinds of limits we can put on, and these are very, very things that are close to my heart. When we are talking about what does and doesn't work when it comes to our systems and institutions. When our municipalities are not cutting it, you go to your state representative. So I want us to really hold our city officials accountable, and you also should be holding your state representatives accountable. But when things aren't working on a city level, you can go to your state representative and say, this isn't working. What can the State Department do? And we can go to your city officials and say, how is this falling through the cracks? You never have to kiss the ass of your city official, and neither do we.
Sarah Anthony, help us with Lansing Housing Commission.
Yes.
That's what I should be doing, right?
Sarah Anthony can absolutely work on housing issues. Sarah
And
Anthony.
maybe you next year.
Yes. And one of my passions is absolutely housing. It is one of the things I've worked on in the background. And leading up to this election, one of the first things I started to put a lot of research into, and especially because I care about discrimination. I care about how housing policy leads to discrimination, leads to segregation, how loans and the way we distribute loans, how the way we label districts adds to all of those issues, and especially leads to racist policies, adds to poverty, adds to homelessness. These are things that can be done at a state level, especially when what's happening at the municipal level is just not addressing it. So we can always go to our state representative and say, this is something that is just not happening. Are there other things that can be addressed? So always feel like we can look at another level, and that's not like going above your boss's head. That's not what it is. It's saying, is there another level of government where these issues are impacted? Is there another way we can address this? Is there a way that something is slipping through the cracks, or a loophole that needs to be closed? And perhaps that is something that can address what's happening at the municipal level as well.
So when you're working in all these communities like this, and you've got these intersections all the time, like you were talking about, and a lot of, actually, when we look at social ills like unhoused or gun violence or whatever, the roots all come back to a similar hub. When you're you're going to have a lot of you have a coffee hour tomorrow night, for example,
Yeah.
4 to 5:30 at the Fledge.
Yeah.
When you're holding that space, how do you keep it balanced between all the different people, with the rights and I mean with the things that they're passionate about, plus like kind of taking up space for your own self to be able to say what you are working on and how do you balance all that?
I think that what's most important right now is that I be available for listening. And what I'm finding, especially when talking to people on doors, is that the overlap between what are my priorities and what people need, there is strong because I created my priorities based around what people said they need. And I think that that's what needed to happen. I didn't create my legislative priorities, my campaign priorities, until I had already spent time listening to what the voters said they needed the most. Because I shouldn't be deciding what I should focus on until people say what is affecting them the most. I can't arbitrarily decide what I think is most important without talking to the people. So I didn't. I spent time first knocking doors and waited until people told me, this is what my life looks like right now. This is how I'm struggling. And then I put on my campaign page, these are my priorities, because they are their priorities. They are our priorities. So people may have noticed that page on my website was blank for a while because I was committed to doing door knocking for a while first. Because
let's get your website out there for a second.
Yeah. It's just emilydievendorf.com. And what I noticed is that and my campaign priorities are different from the other candidates, because what I noticed and what I know as a human rights advocate is that the average person in the 77th district is still prioritizing and needing the very most basic things. A living wage. Yes, absolutely. Reproductive justice. Roe v. Wade was just overturned. Absolutely. And the target is on every other marginalized group that we have ever amended the Constitution to cover, because the Supreme Court wants to bring it back to what our white, straight, cis founding fathers originally wrote the Constitution for. Now, we've amended the Constitution specifically because it was not written originally to protect anybody else. So we should not go back to what it was originally written for. So absolutely, those are priorities as well. But the average Lansing resident still needs a living wage. They still need public schools that will make sure that all of our kids have all of the resources and technology they need to be fully equipped by the time they graduate. We still need to be safe, both at school and in our neighborhoods. And that means investing in our community organizations that are doing prevention work, that are addressing gun violence on a day-to-day basis, and not just looking at the mass shootings that are happening that we see on the news. We have community organizations that are doing really great work that aren't getting the support they need and the funding they need. We need to be supporting small businesses when we're talking about economic development. We need to be talking about affordable healthcare. We need to be talking about environmental justice. We need to be looking at how all of the ways marginalized and oppressed communities are impacted by housing and food access. All of these things are impacting the average person. So these are not pie in the sky requests. The average person is saying, what my priority is? My priority is getting all the things that politicians have been promising me forever and that have not happened yet.
I love that as kind of the motivating way of looking at it, especially when you're coming from such a great place. I like it.
Yeah.
So I got a quick side note though, because when you said environmental justice, I hate Pinky and Stinky. That's what I call them.
Well, tell me. Oh, you mean Lincoln? What do we call that?
Yes, that's
Lincoln,
who I mean.
Lincoln and Nodder.
Yeah, they are. It all the 496.
That's the neighborhood I just moved out of, and I love the Morris Park neighborhood. But I just moved out of there. Yeah, and you couldn't. I didn't have air conditioning, so I had my windows open, and you could not dust without there being dust by the afternoon again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's they wiped out pretty much an all black neighborhood to put that plant in. General Motors did the same. 496 did the same. The personal note, the Norris grocery store, which is a grocery store from the 40s and 50s, was on Olds Avenue there. So it was one of the things that went down when General Motors went through. And then I hear about from like friends a long time ago, they would get car wash like uh, coupons to be able to wash their car to get the ash off their car, and I don't like them as a logo for our city. I don't like them. I mean, they're iconic, yes, but iconic doesn't have to be let's celebrate this icon.
Yeah.
And so, can I call my state rep for
Yeah.
changing the logo of Lansing?
And that is really interesting, because I think we are at a place where we are ready to talk about stopping romanticizing harmful icons. We finally have gotten to that place where we are talking about that when it comes to who represents our teams, and unfortunately we just got there, right? We just got there. And I lived in that neighborhood, and I love being in a city. I always said I want to live in a city because I want to live where I can sit on my front porch and I can talk to my neighbors across the street from my front porch. That's how close I want to be. And I've always lived close enough to a neighbor so that they can see I'm still working at midnight, and they'll text me and they'll say, "Emily, have you eaten? Go to bed." But so I like being in a place where there are industrial buildings next to a river. I don't want that building to make the river so that the folks who are fishing there are going home with something toxic. So I do have mixed feelings about that. We can talk to our state reps about making sure that folks have to be responsible for the toxicity of what they're putting out there. We can talk to our state reps about making sure that there is accountability in manufacturing, and that even if that mess it has long passed, and also if they can't afford it, because I am a supporter of restorative justice, what are other ways you can do that? What else can accountability look like? If you are somebody in the middle of a city who felt like, I can't afford to dispose of the spill that happened, so I dropped it out of my backyard, and we find it later. Well, we don't want you doing things in sneaky ways because you said you don't have money. Let's figure out ways that we can do this so that folks who are creating environmental hazards because they can't afford to do something else have ways to do that. So these are state solutions we can come up with.
All right. I would warn you, be careful when you're messing with those 3 stacks. I get hate mail over this. People love those things.
Yeah. And I'll admit, like they to me, they are beautiful. What they do, is not. So I can see that. There's a part of me that romanticizes the architecture of them myself. There is something to that. They are how I always knew I was close to home. So when you live in that neighborhood, there is something about that. I'm not going to say that I hate the way that they look. So there is something to that.
I don't like their origin.
Yeah.
I don't like their end of life when they have to come down is going to be a horrible nightmare for a lot of people.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I hear that, and I think that that's true, and I think that is all connected to how we need to come up with really holistic ways to transition from manufacturing and more toxic, harmful forms of energy into clean energy, and and not say that we have to do it over a long period of time, because that's not necessary. But instead say we can do this in a relatively short amount of time, and also make sure that the jobs that were a part of this can go into this, and not harm the folks that are a part of that industry. You can love the energy industry and not be invested in the version of it that also harms our future.
Right. I love it. So I'm letting you run long. I don't know if you noticed, but I wanted to make sure that you got important things out for you. So thanks for following me on my tangents too.
Yeah.
Is there anything that I want to talk a little bit about your coffee hour again, what we're doing after your coffee hour, which is a lot of us trying to get together to talk about what a people's council might look like. Your coffee hours from 4 to 5:30. So if you want to meet Emily face to face and talk about some of these things, please come out. We'll have some snacks, we'll have coffee, we'll have water, probably have other things because we'll be getting ready for the other event too. Please come out and meet Emily. And then you're going to stick around and see what everyone has to say in the People's Council meeting as well, right?
Yeah, I definitely encourage folks to attend that. I'm going to go and spend some time in a Oakland neighborhood event, and then shoot back over to the People's Council event. But that is a very important event, and I love that it's happening. So thank you so much for hosting that.
Of course. Anything you want to say about your campaign, your bookstore,
my campaign is very community supported, and so if folks feel like volunteering, these last 2 weeks are essential. If folks want yard signs, let us know. If you don't want yard signs, don't feel pressured to take one. One thing that we are learning as we are out on doors is that we do have other candidates in the race that are just dropping campaign signs in yards. That is not okay. If you don't want a campaign sign in your yard, you are always allowed to take it out of your yard. And never feel like you have to take it. It is not the most essential part of a campaign. So it's just like anything. Nobody's allowed to touch you if you don't want to be touched. Nobody's allowed to claim your space. So that is something that you can request if you want it. And feel free to volunteer. And definitely vote, and let us know if you want help getting to the polls.
Perfect. And I put your website up, and for the EmilyDievendorf.com.
Yep.
Right? And, did I lose you? Okay. I put your website up. They can reach out to you that way. They can see your priorities there. So if you want to learn more, come tomorrow, look at the website, get involved, get out and vote. There's no such thing as a wasted vote because it's a wasted primary or anything like that. We need your voices. We need our voices to be out there. Even if I disagree with you, please go use your voice. We all have to use our voices. That's how Emily and I learn.
Yeah.
So, all right. Last thing. What's something simple somebody could do, or maybe not even simple, but something they could do to help push equity and all the great things that you talked about already, push that forward?
Yeah. Well, I always have the answer to this question, whether I am running for office or not. It is a huge priority to me that we support all of our organizations in the community that are doing great work on the ground to build our community, to build equity, to support all of our communities impacted by oppression. They need boots on the ground. They need funding if you have it. They need supports. And they are always trying to bring in more folks to help. So support your local communities that are trying to do really good work. Amplify their work. Share their work with your social networks. They need it. So I would say that. And I would add, again, regardless of whether I'm running for office, we absolutely always need people to vote, but that is only one part of that. We also need to hold our elected officials accountable. once they're in office, asking them to support our values or to say that they commit to our values is only one thing. Once folks get into office, they are free to do whatever they want, unless we hold them accountable and pay attention to what they're doing while they're there. So it is on us to hold them accountable to actually putting into action what we ask them to represent us, how we ask them to represent us, to make sure that they are actually putting our values into action. And if you end up voting me in, that means me too. I'm committed to doing that, but hold me accountable. Let me know if you disagree with anything. But I intend to have y'all there with me. But always we should be holding all of our elected officials accountable. And I think that is also really why this citizens council meeting is happening. So I think that's
so. Yeah, I was going to say that's really, we want to form the People's Council so that the people have a voice directly to holding City Council, Lansing Housing Commission, the mayor, HRCS, all of them accountable. So, one thing, come tonight if you guys can. Come meet Emily for a little bit, stick around for the People's Council. And the other thing about what will happen tonight is we do have a lot of organizations who will be there represented. So if you wanted to, if you've never met anybody from the Poor People's Campaign, for example, please come over and you'll meet some of them. And if you are an organization, come get involved with us. We're not going to be punching sideways in these meetings. We're punching up and we're pointing our arrows at the right spot, the right target. So
yeah, or tomorrow.
It's tomorrow. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Pitch it. 99 problems, but a pitch ain't one. If you show up today. Yes, tomorrow at 4 to 5:30 tomorrow for Emily and coffee and getting to know her, and 6:30 to 8:30 for the People's Council. I'm going to shut up now since I'm starting to mess everything up.
You're doing a great job.
All right. So anything else?
Nope, that's it. Thank you.
All right. Well, much love to you. Thanks for coming on the show. And I'll be seeing you a lot over the next couple of days.
Yep. Tomorrow. See you tomorrow.
All right. That's a wrap, everyone. Thanks for watching. Love you all and have a great rest of your day. And hope to see every single one of you tomorrow.